addresses. You put your name and your email address on the yellow sheet back there, because it saves a little money with postage. So we'll email you instead of sending you a postcard. Any of you who aren't getting postcards, if you want to get postcards for our meeting, be sure to put your complete address right there. You may notice back there on the back table, World War II Oral History Club. This is a new group that is just being formed in Lancaster, as I understand it. Right? Danny Mastro is one of our members here, is getting it started down there. And what they're doing is essentially the same thing we're doing here. Only, are you going to videotape or they're going to videotape? And are you putting them in a library or something down there?
We're not available through the club.
Where?
We have available through the club.
Through the club, okay. But anyway, there's some flyers back there. Any of you are coming from the Lancaster area. And they are going. Meeting date last Tuesday of every month at 7 o'clock. And when's your first meeting?
Last Tuesday
This month you're going to start. Okay, very good. One other thing, those of you who were here last month, remember Gisela McBride was our speaker, the author of Members of the 1,000-Year-Old Woman. The gal that was born in Berlin in 1925 and lived there under the Nazis until 1945. Anyway, she stopped back tonight and she brought some copies of her book for any of you who didn't get one last month. They're $25. Trusted me to take the money. Yes.
Bill, she also had there's a nice article about her in the Carlisle Sentinel, dealing with her experience, because
Right.
with the anniversary date, it had some information on her and some of the other ladies.
She's looking for a man. His name is Warren D. And he sent her a nice email, she said. And she signed his book but didn't put anything personal in it. And she wanted to try and make contact with him so that she could finish signing her book. So, anything fellows, our Warren D. Email her again. So I think that takes care of all the business. Our speaker tonight is a friend of mine from Hummelstown, and I've seen him walking around for years with this strange blue patch on his hat. And I knew what it meant, and I figured he had a story to tell. And when he started showing up here, I thought I'm going to get him. So tonight I have, and I want to introduce Dean Dunkle, and I caught hell about 2 months ago because one fellow said, "You told damn near my whole story." I'm not going to do that. So I'll just introduce Dean, and I'll say he was Amphibian Command. These were the guys that built the boats that they went in all the beaches in the South Pacific. Of course, they did it in Normandy on D-Day. I thought, if you looked at the stuff over here, I thought I found his uniform. But it turned out it wasn't his, but I figured it might be because it has the Amphibian Command patch and the seahorse on the pocket, and you can tell that whoever it was busted down from PFC to private. I thought that. But with that, Dean Dunkle.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. The pieces that were in the paper were pretty flowery. He went a little overboard. Let's see if I can find the button. There we go. And he went a little overboard in what he was telling in the paper. First of all, I'm going to give a little thing on the brigade. When the war was declared by the Congress in 41, the powers that be down there felt that the war in the South Pacific was going to be altogether different than the war in Europe, because they only had to have one landing in Europe, and then they were on dry land. But down there, the dry land was probably about 100 yards back from the shore. And from then on, it was kind of rough getting through. But they formed this amphibian command. At first it was called the Engineers Amphibian Command. And to shorten it, why they just said Amphibian Command. And that was formed in 1942, June. And first brigade was activated on June 15th, and the second brigade was on June the 20th. And the rest of the brigade, the third, fourth, and fifth, and there were too late of them, that they actually only activated 6. And 3 of them went to Europe, and 3 of them went to the South Pacific. The first, the fifth, and the sixth went to Europe. Second, third, and fourth went to the South Pacific. So the patch of the amphibian, this is the Army patch, which is the same as the patch of the British Commando. Now, there's supposed to be three different ones. The other one is black, and I've never seen one. And this is the amphibian command of the Navy. They had a red patch, a red background, and we had the blue background. And we had the seahorse that went on our hat. I think I have one over there on the page. And what our job was, we were formed after all these. We weren't in any brigade. We were attached to all 3 of them because we were making assemblies of boats that they were going to use in the landing. And in the time that we were there, we assembled in Australia 1,500 boats in a matter of 8 months. And what we had a shop there that we built was 550 feet long, 4 assembly lines. We had 4 jigs that were upside down where they put the boats together, and everything was marked. And a boat came in a kit, and they had each little group that they had could assemble these with the ribs and all. They were all numbered. And after we got those together, we got there in February of 43, and between February 43 and April, about the middle of April, we put out our first boat. And we first had to build a shop. So we had 2 helpers. We had the 532nd and the 542nd came and helped build our shop. And we worked 3 shifts, day and night. And the shop was built during a monsoon season. So mud and water was the main force. And after we got that built, they took our unit and separated half of us into another unit, which was the 5211. And so we got our paperwork and all the replacements. We went out in the part of Australia there and built a 140-bed hospital because they figured this Allen hopping was going to be a bloody mess. And we put up a hospital to accommodate that, but I don't think they ever used it. I've never heard of them using it. Then we went up, after that, we went to New Guinea, where we put up another shop, and this was only a 2-bay shop, where we put LCMs together. Now, an LCM, they call them LCMs, or tank lighters. And the tank lighters, they were a 50-foot boat with 2 twin engines. And we assembled those when we could get about 4 in different parts of assembly in the building. And we were putting out like 2 of those a day. And all we had were welding machines, mostly. And that was a very hot job over in the island. And if you talk about rain, you don't know what rain is. Believe me. It rained for 45 days, the sun come out for half a day, and it rained for 15 more. And everything was moving wet, mud up your knees, and you never tied your shoes because you walked out on them anyway. And you get the mud in there, and it was a little rough walk. And we had big Caterpillar tractors with an M28 frame on, and we hauled the parts in from out in the field. We had fields all around here, diamond fields, we stored these parts. And the stern sections were about 7 tons. And we had to haul them in and put them where they could reach them with the crane and put them on the jigs to start the welding. And now and then, one of the tractors would throw a track out there in the mud, that the fan would catch the mud and blow it back on the operator. So it was a rough time at times, but other times it wasn't too bad. But it was hot. We'd go to work in the morning at about 7 o'clock with the uniforms on. By 8 o'clock we had salt lines in the material. And I did quite a few different jobs in there. I was operating the bulldozer for a while, the rigger. Then I got into drag line, operating a drag line, digging saltwater gravel. They were jetting out into the bay. And anybody wanted saltwater gravel, they'd back a truck up and we'd load them up. And it was really something there. So after we got, I don't know how many boats we put together there, but we put quite a few in Guinea. And then our unit from our Ringer 411 came up, and they started assembling LCT. Now, LCT is a landing craft tank. It's about 105 feet long, and it will hold a lot more than what our LCMs or LCVPs. All these numbers, LCVP is landing craft vehicle personnel. LCM is landing craft mechanized. And they had LSDs with landing ship dock. The dock ships, they would fill the ballast tanks and sink them. And then the LCMs would go inside and be transported to another place by the LSP. And they have LCIs, which is landing craft infantry. And they would have 2 ramps down. The soldiers could walk down and go ashore. Now they went in partway, but you couldn't go all the way. And then after a while, they found out that the 50-footers weren't big enough. So they sent us an extra piece put in front of the stern section to make them 56-footers. Now, then we put out, I don't know how many of those. But getting back to the LCVP, the first one we made, they took 33 of them with 2 PT boats up to New Guinea. Now that's an area from where we were to New Guinea, about 790 miles. And they ran, because Australia did not have the railroad. Their railroads were narrow gauge, and the box cars were like 9 by 12. And it was really something to try to get anything done there. And as I said, that little model of a truck over there, they had Fulton trucks over there. And it was the biggest truck they had, we could see. And it's about 2 ton. And it was a steam turbine. And the driver had a little steam generator there that he stoked and made steam, and then he could go down the road. So, getting back to the LCVP, my job there was getting the engines ready for installation. And we had about 8 of us. I think we only had 2 shifts on that because we could get more engines ready than they could get boats ready for launching. We launched about 7 boats a day, and that was in a 24-hour period. We worked shift work the whole time we were over. We might as well have been down in New Orleans doing it. We got better pay, I can imagine. But it was really an experience to go through. We had our own generator units, we had our own ice machines. We were self-sufficient. Now these brigades, when they were formed, they were self-sufficient too. They would have ordnance people, signalmen, medics, everything. They could go in to a beach and they had the engineers there to clear the beach afterwards and all that. Now on a landing, which we never did, but we were instructed in it and told about it. Our first thing to do was that they took these LCDPs and hung them off the divots on a passenger ship. And they would load them and then they would drop them into the ocean. Until everybody got ready, they would form a circle. And they'd just go around in that until everybody was ready, then they would head for shore. And a landing is a hit or miss operation. You never know what you're going to get into going ashore. And usually a eddy tide would make a gully there and a sandbank. Well, then your boat would hit that, they released the gate, and the boat would hit that and it went down. And the soldiers were instructed when that ramp went down, get out. So sometimes they got out into 2 foot of water, and sometimes they got into 8 foot of water. So that was another thing, and it was underground thing. And that's, most of the boats were taken to the places that were used by water. There was very little transportation of boats when we were there. In fact, they had the first contingent of boats that we got rid of was 33 of them, and they had 2 PT boats helping them along. And they also had a fuel ship with them, so they couldn't get around 200 miles for the tank full of 200 gallons. And all these boats had Grand Marine engines, diesel. And they were made by General Motors. And the only difference between that and what you have with your Greyhound buses at that time is they had a water cooling system. We had radiators, but the cooling system was no air cooling. It was all water cooled through the ocean water. And it was 2-cycle engine, and there was a couple of stories about that too. One fellow thought he was going to clean his up and he used gasoline. So he went down there and he cleaned it up. It was a good job, evidently. He got up there and he pushed the button. That was the end of the boat and then too. And he got the fumes in the engine because it sucked the engine in the blower on it, sucked the fumes in there, and they were ignited as soon as it got up in the top of the cylinder, and it just took over control over the speed of the engine. And it blew up. It ran so fast it just blew apart. And he was on that on the conning tower there, and he was with it. That's all that was kind of a mess. So that's about all I can tell you about the brigades. Now our unit, I enlisted in June the 29th, 1942. And I entered basic July 1st at Camp Lee position. And the first thing they taught us was regimental review. That was the first thing that they had in their mind. And we did that all day Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon. And about 4 o'clock, everybody had to go in to change. We had regimental review that evening. And after we got there, well, we did the regular the basic training, even rifle range and bivouac and all kinds of little goodies. And about the middle of August, they came and said, everybody pack your bags, we're leaving. So they took the whole training regiments out of Camp Lee, put them on trains, and took us to Camp Evers, Massachusetts. And this is when the Amphibian Command was formed. Now, when I went in, I thought I was going to go to the Air Force. That's what I wanted. But don't ever say that you want to go join the Army, that you want a certain thing, because it's best not to say anything, because they're going to put you where they want you. And another thing that happened prior to that, before I went in, one time we were visiting with some friends, and I don't know how many people come in, coming in. They were eating tea leaves. And they told me into getting a cup of tea and having my tea leaves in there. So I did it. The lady came and she said, you're going to be around a lot of boats. I said, no. I said, I'm going to go in the airport. And she said, that's not what it says here. So she was right. I was wrong. So I did get around a lot of boats. When we were in Camp Edwards, why then, every time you went into a new camp, why they interviewed me again, and I said I was interested in diesel engines. Well, the next day I was on my way to Flint, Michigan to General Motors Institute of Technology. I was out there for two weeks, I think. And the guy out there taught me something. Another fellow and I were supposed to tear this engine down and put it back together. So we thought we were going to be smart. So we got cans, and when we take something apart, we put all those bolts in one can. We had a half a dozen cans around there. And he started saying, he says, you're never going to be a mechanic that way. And he took them and put them all in a bucket, and they shook the bucket. And to this day, I never put them in separate containers. You just have to see what you're doing. But we were out there for about 2 weeks. We came back to Edwards. And the thing is, I was in the United States for 6.5 months. And in 6.5 months, I was in 5 different camps. So I was in any one camp. The most I was at Camp Legion. The rest of the time, I was 2 weeks or something like that, or 4 weeks at the most. And then we left up there, and we went down to Charlotte, Florida. And after the Charlotte, Florida, why they had that invasion of all the seniors up there, but they were training these troops. Well, that was the 1st and 2nd Brigade that was on that. And after they were done with that, why we got all the boats down in Charlotte, Florida by train. So we had boats everywhere that you could think of. And some places you didn't want to think about it. And after we got that, well, we were supposed to repair these, but we didn't have any parts to begin with. And we had to just make with what we had. And they were building fuel tanks there. This is going to be the training area for the Amphibious Command. And the reason they moved it probably from Edwards down there, in the wintertime they couldn't do training in Edwards. So they had a camp about 5 miles from us, Camp Gordon Johnson. And after we were there about, as I say, about 4 weeks, packed up again, and we went to Fort Worth, California. And once again, we were out there, we run up and down the sand dunes, firing Twin 50s out across Monterey Bay, trying to hit balloons, you couldn't hit them. If you ever, I don't know if any of you ever fired a Twin 50. It's like hanging on to 2 jackhammers at the same time. You had a belt or a seat there that you sat in, and you had these 250 caliber machine guns, which is a pretty good sized piece of equipment. When you pull that trigger, you got vibrated. And they can use it in some of these places to lose weight. So then we got in Fort Worth while we packed up again. And you know the Army is quite a operation. They would get us and they'd say, pack up, we're leaving. You get everything together, come out in the yard, out in the building, sit down. Go out there and sit down and sit there for a couple hours. Up, cancel, go back in, and do that 3 or 4 times, and when the time comes, you don't care if you go or not. In fact, you want to go because you're tired of packing and unpacking. So we went there, and then we went up to Camp Stoneman, which is in San Francisco, and rode on a Dutch ship to Binta. And when we did that, by the man detail sergeant came down, and he said, I want to show you what you're sleeping on. So he pulled back the canvas, and this is up one of the boards there. Here we had ammunition, torpedoes. They had us, we'd have still been flying. Because we were loaded for bear on the bow of the ship there. My bunk was right at the head of the anchor lock. When they pulled down anchor lock, that was an awful mess too. We had four tiers of bunk. And down in the hole. When we came together, we came like this. Our bunk was right there in the bow of the ship. We started out from underneath the Golden Gate. And we went down south to Mexico. And from Mexico out across the Pacific. And I'll show you that on the map there. It's a long way to Australia, believe me. But before we went there, this is another thing that was pretty funny. Before we went there, they issued everybody OD. Brand new OD. While we were in Fort Worth, California. And we got on board the ship, we got down below the equator there, or around the equator, it got pretty warm. So we went and got our kicks back on, or our khakis. But they do that things too. We thought maybe we were going to Alaska. Who knows? We got new mackinaws, we got overcoats. We had the whole caboodle. So then we went out across the ocean, and we had, I think it was 3 or 4 B-38s on deck. And being this was January, about the 3rd or 4th, why we had a lot of mail, Christmas mail from the troops. So we went out across there, and 18 days out, we hit Brisbane. And we unloaded our airplanes and the mail. It was Sunday afternoon at 3. Then we would start up, and nobody knew where we were going. I think our outfit was supposed to be a secret or something. Nobody knew where we were going. So we sailed up and down the coast of Australia for 12 days. So we finally found out that we were supposed to go, somebody said I'm not supposed to pronounce it the way I do, but I'm going to pronounce it that way. Cairns, Australia, which is in Queensland, there's tropical. And we pulled into there, and I don't know why they didn't know that's where we went, because our advanced detail was there, they had tents and everything for us. And our job, my first job there, I was chosen to be a guard on the boat that the Aussies were unloading. Now there's another outfit, I'll tell you. These are longshoremen. They would go down and they'd work in the hole, and about a half an hour, 45 minutes. Then it was time for smoke over. Out the hole they come, go in the dock, have a smoke up. After that, about 15, 20 minutes, they go back down in the hole. And another 45 minutes or so. The TO. Out of the hole they come again and have tea. And this kept up all day long. And when we got there, we went to work. We had these little boxcars that I said were about 9 by 12 side. And it took them about 4 hours to load to be here in about half an hour. And they said, you guys are going to burn yourselves out. Well, we didn't burn ourselves out. But it was an education. And in October, that's when we built the hospital. October, September, and October. And October the 22nd, we left from New Guinea. And it was dry when we got there. The day we got there was dry. The next day, we wouldn't want to have been there. It was raining. A little stream down where we were bivouac. And the day we got there, there was a couple of little mosquito holes. Mosquitoes were breeding. The next day, you couldn't cross it. The water was 4 or 5 foot deep and running about 20 miles an hour or better. And we had to, well, they did get us an alligator, which was almost useless. But what two issues in there. But on the water itself, when they sit in the water, they're low. If you get away, it's swamp. And right over the side of the swamp, right down there. So after we were making these boats up in New Guinea, I guess according to what I have down here, I don't know what it's right about. It says 6 units a day. But we must have had eight boats in different being assembled. And as I said, the other unit came up there, and they put the old sea keys there, which were, I think, were about 105 feet. And they were a good sized boat. Now, in the beginning of this unit, the Army and the Navy had an argument. Who was going to do what with what boats? So it was decided that the Navy would do everything above an LCM. They would take care of all the boats that were LSTs, LCTs, and all that. That's why we built the LCTs for the Navy. And all we did was handle the LCTP and the LCM. And our brigade was responsible for a division of soldiers. They were to take the soldiers in. Now, when Ed went on a landing, the priority was to get the soldiers on shore first. And after they got those on shore, then to get the engineers and signalmen and the coordinate men and medics, and they went along with the first group to on shore. And after they had everybody ashore, so some of the times when they were coming back from regular landing, they would put wounded on board. And they bring the wounded back to the hospital ship or wherever, unload, and then they go and get another one of the soldiers. Well, these LCDPs held 38 men. That's 37 men in our office. And he was in charge. And the first boats that we put out were just 3/4 plywood. And they found out that machine gun bullets go through that pretty easy. So we brought them back in, and we put 1/4-inch armor plate on them. And that helped save them. Now, a lot of the boats that were damaged were ones that were damaged in high seas. Now, I really don't understand how they're transporting all these soldiers, and they were transporting hundreds of miles. And they must have been seasick when they got there. That's the only thing I can say, because they bounced around a bit. And after they got done with the soldiers going on and getting the wounded off, then they start hauling in ammunition and food, and make stockpiles of ammunition and food on the beach. And this kept up until everything was done. And each unit had their own boat maintenance outfits, and they were just self-contained. The soldiers, or the 2 generals in Form B, did a magnificent job of it, because everything went smoothly. Now after we were done at New Guinea, then they took us up to Batangas, Philippine Islands. And that was the only time we were in convoy. We were in the convoy for the days we lived in Howell. Our flagship was the USS America, which was in front of us. We were on a Liberty ship. No South Sea Island cruisers aren't what they packed up with. We were on deck, right underneath the booms. And we didn't want to raise up too quick. And we had tarps over the booms because of the rain. It usually rained every evening, little showers. And then we got into Batangas, we built another shop where we were going to put LCMs together. But I don't remember, I have no recollection of ever turning out one vote there. I think the war ended before that we got to that point. And I'll check here and see what I missed or if I didn't miss. Oh, here's the structure of the Army. This is something that I really didn't know. They have a structure of the Army. An Army group is 800,000 up to 2 or more armies. An Army is 400,000 men. A Corps is 65 to 90,000. A division, now different divisions are of different sizes. An airborne division is 11,500. An armored division is 14,500. And an infantry division is 13,800. A brigade, back then when they formed the brigade, a brigade was supposed to have 7,500 men and 550 boats. Now that came down for a brigade of 3 regiments, 20 some odd companies. They would probably have 30, 40 boats in each company. And on another thing on landing, when they had landing, after the boats went in circles to get everybody together, then they would head for shore, but they were never close together because one shell could get 2 boats at one time. And a lot of the boats did get blown up before they could hit the shore. And then they had a regiment was 2,000 to 3,700. Battle group was 1,500. And the battalion was 500 to 12. So we had 5 companies. 5 companies of 200, 220 men each. So that would come out pretty good. And a company was 200, a platoon 40, and a squad 12. But they had everything pretty much alike. Now here they have here's the different boats. LCVP is landing craft vehicle personnel. An LCM is landing craft mechanized. An LCT is a landing craft tank. An LST is the one I told you about where they fill the ballast tanks and sink it and then have boats and then they take them to wherever they're going. That's an LST, landing ship dock. And an LST is a landing ship tank. Another name. They don't have many people. An LCI was a landing craft division. Last night I had probably taped a lot of shows on public history. And the one last night was LCVPs with Army units that transported things. And the new one is what they call the LCAC. And it's a big unit, a couple $1 million a piece. And what it is, it's 9,000 horsepower. There's 2 big fans on it, that propels it. And when they put it to go in the ocean, they go about 50 miles an hour. And it raises up 5 feet off the ocean. It's air underneath, and then the fans push it forward. And by turning the fans one way or the other, they spin around in a circle. And that's what they do now, because then they would not interfere with any beach oil, iron, or whatever they had to keep the boats going on. That was another thing about the boats. They come into a beach, and they never knew if there was going to be steel laid in there to keep them out or not. So a lot of times, the waves would come up, they bring you right down on some of that steel and put a hole in it. And it was really education in itself. Some of my problems were that they lost my doctors about, I moved around today on lunch. Every time I move in, and then I start over my medical shop. I don't know, I must have been a walking test tube or something. But, and that happened, well, in the States it happened everywhere. And I really didn't get caught up until I got into Australia. I didn't want out one place for a long period of time. Now when we, this shop that we built, the area that we were in is sugar cane. So where we built the boat, that was on sugar cane land. And the Australians were the ones that, to harvest sugar cane, you have to burn the field, burn the leaves off. And they would burn a section. Now this is enough to do till noon. Well, 9 o'clock they had that done. So then they burn them up. We did the whole field in one day that would take them a week. And we used our trucks to haul it to the refinery. And that's when we cleaned off everything. And over there, everything looks like a kangaroo. Even the rats that were in the sugar cane. And it just looked like a miniature kangaroo. They had big long legs and a long tail. And they hop along just like a kangaroo. In fact, we had in our camping area, we had kangaroos. We go down into town and get bananas or something and have them there. These kangaroos would poke through the tent and eat our bananas. Of course, we never got near them because they were wicked animals. They could, their nails were real long and sharp. So we weren't supposed to give it to them, didn't go. But they, is there any questions that anybody would like to have answered if I can? I'm not saying I'm not an expert. I'm not 5,000 long.
I got one for you.
What's that?
He was telling me the other day, which I think they enjoyed, the bottom of the, I guess it was the LCR, that they had the keel and then
They
way
had
to
a,
reverse the crops or break them loose on the beach.
Oh, I'll show them that then. The Higgins boat, they made a boat that had a bow, a regular bow on it. And I think that's why they started giving us parachute boats. When these bowed ships would go on land while they were up, and then you had to crawl up on the bow itself and jump off. Well, that was 4 or 5 feet, and there was a lot of sprained ankles and I guess broken ankles too. But then the Chris-Craft, they took several of these, several hundred of them, I guess, and they revamped the bow. They took a 3.5-foot galley down through the bow and put a 3.5-foot ramp on it. And that didn't go over very well either because they told them that's not going to work. So when they dropped the bow, everybody had to go off single file. Well, that was just like a pigeon sheet. So they didn't do those. And the Navy was real hard on. I just read his book. He had a autobiography out. Higgins. He was quite an engineer. He didn't go to engineering school. He was in his 30s. But he knew boats. And he made all kinds of boats for the rum runners, the feds would go catch the rum runners, and the reason, and also for the oil-seeking outfit. And he put a head load on there, and the bow had a solid wooden frame. And they could hit a log at full speed, which was around 12 knots, and it wouldn't harm anything. They could roll right over it or push it out of the way or whatever. The same way with 55-gallon drums, they could roll over those and push them out of the way. It didn't hurt the boat at all. But the Navy always wanted to, for the fight runners, the ones that they wanted to use for landing, they wanted to cut them down to 17 feet. Well, they wouldn't take any. 17-foot boat you couldn't put anybody on. But they as these LCVP would carry in 8,100 pounds of material. And I'll show you this on the bottom of the boat. This came from New Orleans. The D-Day Museum. If anybody, that is something to see. My friend back there, Mr. Smith, he went down there with me. Now this boat has this bridge. And when it went in on the beach, this made a groove in the sand. When they reversed the motors, reversed the transmission, the water would go up along there and loosen the boat. Then the boat would back off the beach. And that was one of Higgins' designs. That made quite a groove in the sand. This model is almost perfect, except that it doesn't run. The things on it are really right down to where it should be. And the thing is made in China, out of all places. Now this, I think there's a Navy man here. He has one of these on his hat. I don't know, somewhere around here. There he is. There he is. He's got the Navy. What did you do, sir?
I was a motor Mac.
Motor Mac.
What's that?
He took care of the engine on a boat. Motor Mac. Motor mechanic. You gotta get up with it there, boy. You're pretty occupation. You don't know anything.
We didn't have any motor Macs in the infantry.
Yeah, but the infantry, the motor Mac took the infantry in. And this is another, when we got into Australia. Australia was very backward then. And the biggest vehicle they had for moving freight was a steam-driven truck, which was approximately 2 tons capacity. Now this is a model one. This isn't a Vulcan. It's very similar. The driver had a little steam generator, a little stove that he had charcoal or wood bits or whatever in it, and a bottle of water. And he'd stoke this thing up and get steam, and then when he was ready to go, why the steam would go down into here to the cylinder, turn the chain and turn the wheel. And you hear him going down the road. And that's the way he went down the road. And that was about the biggest. When we unloaded our 2.5 ton 6x6 and our 4 ton or 6 ton Gorgons, they had never seen anything. But we changed to, they were always driving on the right hand side, or on the left hand side, but we changed that. That was no good for us. Yes.
What was the reason behind sending the LCVPs over to Pittsburgh?
Because to send a fully assembled one, they could only get like 4 or 6 on ship. And in that book there, the one book on the getting them across, the General Trudeau is the one that formed our academy. And he said, we'll send them over in pieces and they can put them together over there. And in the whole time that we were over there, with all the boats that we made, through our 411 and 50, I figured we put out between 3,000 and 3,500 boats.
So the biggest especially the latest fellow pieces.
They put them in kits, and sent them to us and put them together.
So the LCS first section, that's all pre-made.
That was all the stuff, all we had to do was bullets. And the piece in front of the stern section, everything came in. There was a ship cut apart and then split down the middle. And that's what it was. Of course, we didn't do that to the ramp door, but they did that. And after we had all those welded, they had regular round, each compartment had a manhole. And we had a regular manhole cover we put on there with a rubber gas. It's all full of air. And then we had a guy with a soapy brush to check for leaks. We didn't use one boat. But we did pour a couple of them up in the jungle. You know, another thing about the landing, on a landing over there, the land is only maybe 100 yards deep, and the rest is jungle. I mean, it's tangled, and guys you can't even walk. So most of the war, actually the war in Europe, they had one landing, and then it was a land war. We had water war. Every time they went into a beach, they had a fight, and then when that was done, they moved away and went to another island and had another fight. And altogether, the 2nd Brigade is what I have. I haven't found out of any other brigade, 3rd or 4th. With the, I lost my train of thought here. I can't think what I was going to say. Now that's a senior moment. Well, they had Sicily, they had North Africa, and they had Normandy.
Southern France.
Well, we had 80 some D-days with the boats that we made. We had 80 some D-days. Now, there's another little bit of information. They claim that the 2nd Brigade transported 2 million men and went 3 million miles and transported 1,400,000 pounds or 1,000 tons of material. Now that's what the Corps of Engineers that made this book says it happened. Now I have no idea, or I have no way of proving it or disproving it. But this book that I have was made, it's a spin-off of the one that was made by Stackpole. And that one went out of circulation, so that somebody else took it over, and they called it Put 'em Across. That was about the 2nd Brigade. Yes, sir.
How many tanks are on a landing craft?
How many tanks?
Yeah, how many can you put on a landing craft?
Well, that depends on the size
I
of
know
the
that.
tank.
I knew that answer. What is the maximum?
Well, that's there, you know, what,
2 on an LCM.
2 of them on an OCM, 56 foot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Depends on the size tank. Depends on the size
Well-
tank.
An LCBP.
Depending on the size of the tank that we had at that time.
They was only cheap and half the troops, or maybe a weapons carrier or so. But I have no idea how many troops in LCM or 50 or 56 foot carrier. It would probably be, well, I would say 100 anyway.
The LCM only could carry one Sherman tank.
Oh, yeah. Well,
As the more progressive Sherman's got more equipment on them, that's when they added on the extra 5 feet to give it more capacity.
Well, yeah.
The Sherman's per alley basically 30 tons, and then they also do over 13 tons, and then that's why they add the extra 5 feet. And the LCTs are 2 variants of those, LCT 5, which had just strictly a battle ramp,
yeah.
and then the LCT 6 had ramps on both sides. So they both carry up. Well, the LC5, they carry 4 Shermans, and the LC6, they carry 5 or 6, depending on how heavy they were.
So the LCT would probably carry about 3 or 4. That's the engine or propellant units of the LCT were very very odd outfit. They took 4 of the 671, the same engine that was in the LCVP or the LCV, and they hooked 4 of them together on one clutch. And you can start one engine up, you can start all 3 of them. They got a 3. And they had 3 sets of those. There was 12 engines that propelled that boat. And 3 propellers on it. And I did guard duty one Christmas Eve. Guard duty, I know. They were, yes,
Spare parts when you were overseas, were they plentiful, or did you have to?
well, we had all our parts were plentiful because we were all brand new. Now, I don't know about the boat maintenance outfits, but they may have had, yes.
Later in the campaign during the Philippine, after the Philippine invasion, we had an LST that was fitted out and turned over to the brigades that was fitted with spare parts. And they would go along with the brigade. I was in the same outfit as him, by the way.
The parts, when they were packed, were they packed in
They were
Michigan?
packed in kits.
Yeah, I mean, did Michigan do this, or where were they? In the United States?
They were done in New Orleans. They didn't go.
New Orleans?
So they, after they formed these units, they contracted Evan Root, Manitowoc, which is a boat building outfit in Wisconsin, and Gray Marine, which was General Motors, and Flint or Detroit, and got everything going. That was the first thing they did. Get contracts with all these outfits. Now, I don't know what Manitowoc made, or I don't know what Evan Root made. Some of them made the Hull Sky and Beta Ring, and that was used in some of the landing craft boats, but they were a little faster because they were a little higher RPM, and that was a big engine. The fact matters, when I worked with everything after the war for a year or so, and we had a tank recovery with a Hull Scott Beta Ring in it. That darn thing was about 6 foot long. And of course, that would pick up a 30-ton tank and take it anywhere you wanted to take it.
Mr. Stowe?
When you were in Australia, did the Jacks know you were there? Did they try to
We
sell you?
hoped they didn't. That's why they didn't know where we were going. I think that's why it was so secretive of what we were doing and where we were going.
So you weren't bothered being shelled?
We had, no, when we got to Australia, the Jacks were at Port Moresby in New Guinea. And they said at that time that they were getting ready to go across from Port Moresby into the northern part of New Guinea. Now, we had the 32nd Division, which I think is airborne now, isn't it? 32nd? Or the 82nd, no. It's like this one. And then we had the 41st Division. But the 32nd was above us. And they were more or less the units to protect us, you might say. Now, we were never in combat. We were in combat areas, and we had alerts. But, we had a couple of our planes aboard. They thought it was Jack. And one security daylight hours, they had the tactical fuel tanks. They dropped one of those in our area. Yes,
The LCVPs were plywood, the rest were all metal?
the LCDPs were 5/8 plywood with an armor plating on the side.
How did they hold up in the tropics with the heat and everything?
Well, you won't find one. The fact of the matter is, at the D-Day Museum in New Orleans, they have one on display.
Yeah, there's one
That
in
was
New
made.
York.
That was made from parts that were left over, and they got people that were making them during the war to put this together. Now, all the people that put that together today are ancient, you might say. But they put it together, they had an engine in it, they ran it up the river, and then they took it out of the river and put it in the museum. So it is one that actually was christened in the water. Yes?
Dean, before you let these folks get away, since we visited all these beautiful places together, you need to tell them a little bit more about Florida.
About what?
About Florida. Or
About
what
Florida.
place it was at that time.
I'll tell you, I didn't lose anything in Florida. We were up in Carabel, and that's up on the goosenecks of Florida. Well, there's stain crab, sulfur water. You can't drink the water. When I heated it, it was worse yet. And snakes. I don't think you could say, I don't think there was nothing there that we didn't have everywhere else. But they were, that was, as I said, I never watched anything there. And I was glad to get out of there. The only time we went up to Waukeula Springs, that's where they were making these Tarzan movies at that time. And that was the best drink of water I ever had. When you eat that sulfur water, you have a stink.
Sure. You've got to remember that the initial assault troops was light equipment and personnel making the initial landing. They weren't taking anything heavy in there. If they took any tanks, it was a light tank.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's what the LCM was for.
Yeah, but all the troops, the land landings were, the soldiers had to get over first. And after the soldiers were there, they sent in the engineering units to clear the beach, and the ordnance people to do away with the duds or whatever might be laying on the beach, and then signalmen to set up communications, and then they also brought in a road building outfit. And none of the people, they tell me in the book there, none of the people like to go more than 12 miles. What the reason was, I didn't figure that one out yet, but I guess that they were getting too far away from where they had some protection.
You touched on something else about the ramp boats, the LCBPs running on the sandbar, and there might be deep water in the sandbar. Well, a lot of people in Normandy drowned because they didn't pay attention when they used the self-inflatable life preserver, and they didn't put it around under their arms, they had it around their waist, and they got off the ramp, they were loaded down with a backpack, and they tipped them over and they drowned. They lost a lot of people in Normandy.
In this book here, is about Normandy, and it says in there, the LST, one of the LSTs pulled in, the doors opened, the ramp went down, and 4 tanks went into 30 foot of water. The tanks were lost, the crews were lost, and everything. When you take a 30-ton tank and it sinks into 30 foot of water, it's a big splash. But they didn't stop the rest of them because they wasn't way there to stop them. And they just went off the end of the ramp and down. They probably landed on each other, but it was a mess. And here's another reason. This is what one of these. Here shows a ramp of a boat. Now these guys are about, they were off the shore, off the beach, and they're wading through up to their waist. And if you got in 8 foot of water, you were gone. With a 60-pound bag, you didn't swim. Yes, sir.
Personnel who operated these land craft, were they Army or Navy?
LCDPs, the Army had to take care of their troops, and they were all Army. What happened in the beginning when they formed this, they had a lieutenant colonel. And he went around to all the boat clubs and was offering commissions to anybody that knew how to operate a boat. Of course, they had to go to officers training to begin with, but that's where they got a lot of their personnel for well, everybody had to learn navigation, traveling by the stars, and all that. And they had, it was quite a teaching program that they had to get these people to run these boats.
How far do they travel in the water before they land on the beaches?
Well, that depends on how deep the bay was that the big ships would stay. And I was talking to a fellow today, and what they had, after they lowered their boats off the gibbets, and then they had cargo nets thrown over the side of the ship. And these soldiers that were left had to crawl down these cargo nets and into the boat. Well, they lost a good many men that way, but they don't tell you that. Because the big ship was moving and the little ship was moving. And sometimes they weren't moving together. And when these guys get down there, they want to go get in the boat, and the boat was over here and not where they thought it was. And they fall in the water. And then the boat would come together, and that was the end of it. Now, you don't hear about those in any books or any newspaper like this.
Bill?
Do you have anybody who used to work on a PT boat?
No, that's Navy. That's Navy. But all the PT boats were made by Indians. And he designed them and made them. And everybody tried to duplicate them, and nobody, they'd always have these demonstrations. And the other guys, they were left out. Higgins was always ahead, according to the autobiography.
I don't think the American public is aware that today there's still a division of labor, that the Navy will only be responsible for bringing you in about 3 miles from the shore. Because of that, the Army still has a very sizable fleet, and they train down at Fort Eustis in Virginia.
Fort Eustis?
Yeah, right. You been there?
No. That's the transportation money.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to find out about the engineering camp. It used to be Fort Belvoir, but I think that was moved west.
Leonard Wood.
Brown.
Yeah.
Kansas.
He's in Missouri.
That's right.
Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Leonard Wood. Well, I knew that they moved out of Belvoir.
Any other questions?
If not, Dave, thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you for that.
For those of you who are new, we don't have dues. We do mail our postcards every month, and so we need a little bit of money, and instead of passing the hat, we pass the steel card.
Bill, next month's meeting,
Oh, yes, one thing I did want to tell everybody. As you know, starting June 1st, the library closes at 8 o'clock. And 7 to 8 doesn't really cut it for us. I've made arrangements, instead of going all the way out to the Gap like we did last summer, June, July, and August, Country Meadows Assisted Living here in Hershey has agreed to let us come over there. I don't know how many of you have been there. It's on Sand Hill Road, right in downtown Hershey. And they have a room that'll handle at least 100 people. And they're tickled to death to have us come because a lot of their male residents are World War II vets. And they want to come, and they were so tickled that they're going to also provide free refreshments. So we will be there. You know, it'll still be first Thursday, 7 o'clock. We will be at Country Meadows Assisted Living Center here.